After my husband's affair destroyed our marriage, his mistress husband showed up at my door. "I have a development empire worth $300 million, he said. "Say yes, and we will be at the courthouse by 9 tomorrow morning." It took me 4 seconds to answer him. "My name is Lily Carter, 29, a forensic accountant in Chicago with 6 years of experience, finding discrepancies other people missed. Precise, methodical, and until recently, completely fooled by my own husband. I had chosen the window seat at Alara's Bistro on purpose. Half hidden behind a pillar, my coffee gone cold an hour earlier, watching my husband James laugh with a woman across the table and tuck a strand of hair behind her ear the exact same way he'd once done to me. Back when I still believed every word he said. Her name was Diana Mercer, wife of Nathan Mercer, founder of one of the Midwest's most powerful real estate firms, a woman who entered a room without even trying. 2 months earlier, James had come home pale with worry about his failing consulting firm, sat at our kitchen table with his head in his hands, and asked me to sign what he called a financial protection agreement. "Standard practice," he said. "Just a lawyer friend and a formality. Just needing my signature to protect us both." I trusted him because he was my husband, and I had never once given myself a reason not to. What I had actually signed was a post-nuptial agreement waiving every claim to our shared savings. Our joint property and the house I had personally put $60,000 into, money I had saved for 4 years before we were even married. He filed for divorce that same afternoon. While I sat watching them from across the restaurant, a man I had never met sat down uninvited across from me. Tall, composed, a face that had learned long ago to reveal nothing. Nathan Mercer, Diana's soon-to-be ex-husband, slid a thick manila envelope onto the table. Inside was proof, a wire transfer of $340,000 from his company's operating accounts into a shell company called Axis Horizon Consulting, with James listed as the registered agent on page 7. They had been running this scheme together for 14 months, funneling over $600,000 in a single month alone, moved in smaller amounts specifically designed to avoid flags. Nathan explained he needed someone with forensic credentials and absolutely no ties to his company or to Diana to trace every fraudulent transaction cleanly enough to hold up in court. Someone with real legal standing inside the firm since Diana still held her name on 2 operating accounts he could not remove without board approval. And his current CFO happened to be her cousin. If I married him civilly, on paper, Illinois corporate law would give me the standing to petition for immediate review of the company's marital and business assets. "Courthouse opens at 9, he said. "I have already checked the appointment availability. I have one condition," I told him. "Full unrestricted access to every account, contract, and vendor file dating back 3 years, nothing locked, nothing filtered, and you don't interfere with my process." He studied me the way I imagined he studied blueprints, looking for weaknesses, and found none. "9, he said, standing and buttoning his coat. "Don't be late." The civil ceremony took 11 minutes. I photographed the marriage certificate on the courthouse steps and sent it to James with one line. "Thought you should know I am spending the morning at the courthouse, too. Congratulations on the divorce, enjoy the house." By that afternoon, Nathan introduced me to his staff as the interim chief financial officer with immediate authority over every approval. I confronted the accounts payable head, Carol Sims, who had received 2 unexplained bonuses totaling $32,000, and demanded full system access within 20 minutes. She resigned by email 2 days later. Within hours, I found the pattern. Invoices for advisory services with 0 corresponding deliverables. Professionally formatted fiction generating real money leaving the company. $1.4 million over 14 months. I called an all-staff meeting offering amnesty to anyone who came forward voluntarily. 2 analysts and a coordinator did, and the fuller picture emerged. James had been running a parallel scheme through his own vendor contacts, splitting money between Diana and an offshore holding company registered in his elderly mother's name in Tennessee, a woman who had no idea her identity was being used. Diana called me directly, warning that Nathan was simply using me as a legal instrument and I would be discarded when this ended. I told her calmly I had already found the Axis Horizon transfers, the secondary vendor network, the offshore account, and an interesting connection between her brother's company and 3 of our biggest vendors. The line went silent. 2 days later, I discovered she had scheduled an emergency investor meeting to have Nathan removed as CEO entirely, needing only 2 outside votes to succeed. If she won, my authority and every shred of evidence I had gathered could be tied up in litigation for years. I met with the first investor that morning, who withdrew her support within 30 minutes of seeing the evidence. The second, Richard Holt, a man who had known Diana for 11 years, was harder. dismissing me until I placed a single page in front of him. An official IRS referral filed that morning naming Diana in an active investigation for wire fraud and conspiracy. If his fund appeared connected to obstruction of that investigation, his other clients would ask serious questions. He read it twice, closed his folder, and told me he would not be attending the meeting. Without both outside votes, Diana's motion failed before it was even called to order. Cornered, Diana turned on James, blaming him for a frozen transaction and telling him he was on his own. Desperate and drowning in defaulted loans he'd taken out to fund his half of the scheme, he called me repeatedly until I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop in Evanston. He looked like he had aged 5 years and 2 weeks. I laid out exactly what the evidence showed and offered him one real path forward: full cooperation with investigators and a signed statement returning every dollar he could account for, in exchange for a cooperation designation that would matter significantly at sentencing. He admitted there was a backup drive at his mother's house in Knoxville containing every transaction record, every split with Diana, every Shell account, and signed the authorization to retrieve it. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I told him to be honest with the investigators and left. Diana's arrest played out on the local news by noon that Tuesday: wire fraud, conspiracy to launder money, tax evasion. James was taken in separately to deliver his full statement. Watching the coverage in Nathan's office, he poured 2 glasses of bourbon and said simply, "It is done." I told him I had already drafted the handover documents for a permanent CFO and intended to file for divorce that week, since the marriage had served its purpose and I did not intend any claim on the company. He stopped me cold. "Leave the files," he said. "You have been preparing your exit since this morning, and I have been watching you do it." He told me I was the most capable person he had ever worked with, that I had rebuilt the company's entire financial structure in 3 weeks while dismantling a 14-month fraud network and protecting 2 investors from their own worst instincts, and that the thought of me walking out that night and not coming back was the first thing in a long time that had genuinely worried him. I asked if he was saying he loved me. "I'm saying you are the only person in 11 years running this company who has never once tried to manage me or flatter me or protect me from the truth," he said. "I trust you completely, which is not something I say lightly. Make of that what you will. I made of it quite a lot." The divorce filing never got sent. 6 weeks later, the permanent CFO position became mine with full board approval, sealed with nothing more romantic than a signed appointment letter, which felt exactly right for us. Diana's trial ran 8 days and ended in conviction on every count. James received a reduced sentence for his full cooperation. His documentation so thorough that federal investigators called it the cleanest fraud case they'd ever seen, and his mother's name was cleared within 48 hours. Walking out of the county building into a bright March afternoon after finalizing the last of his civil paperwork, I called Nathan. "It is done," I said. "Come home," he replied. "The quarterly numbers are in, and I want you to look at them before the 5 o'clock call." It was possibly the least romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. And I laughed anyway, because somewhere along the way, a marriage that started as a contract had quietly become the truest one I had ever had. And that is the part no spreadsheet could have predicted. If this story moved you, let me know in the comments which moment hit you the hardest, and tell me where you are watching from tonight. This has been another story from the Revenge Tales. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens next. Thank you for staying with me until the very end.